Some businesses succeed, some don't. Then there are those that seem to have been around forever. The true entrepreneurial success story. How did they do it? What was their vision? What makes a success? In this special episode for Eye on Annapolis, we speak with the true success stories, those business owners that have been around for decades, learn from their successes and failures. Now, here's host John Fernay.
Joining us today on the phone is Rick Nelson, who is the owner of the Annapolis Sailing School. How are you today?
I'm doing well. Thanks. Looking forward to discussing the school.
I didn't realize that the school was as old as it was. I learned that you guys are celebrating in 2019 the 60th year.
Yes. In fact, while Jenny Nelson, my wife, and myself have only owned the school for 5 years, our roots go back further. Jenny was an instructor at the school in the 70s. And certainly the Wilson family, and living down on Bembe Beach, knew well of Jerry Wood and what he started back in 1959, the first recreational sailing school in the country.
Well, you said Jerry Wood. Now, Jerry was involved with the Annapolis boat shows, right?
Yes, indeed. He, in fact, people probably know him just as well for that. And I've got to give Jerry credit. I never having met him in real life, but what he did in terms of Annapolis, in terms of economic impact, the boat show obviously continues to this day to be a powerful driver in the spring and certainly in the fall, but also the sailing school, which, as I understand at the time, Annapolis was a waterman's town, but that was on the decline because of lack of oysters in the bay and crabs. And he really introduced sailing to Annapolis in a way that, now we think of it as the sailing capital of America, but at the time it was just a dream in his mind.
Well, I'll tell you, it's funny. It's you talk about the boat shows, and they're celebrating their 50th year this year. So I guess the sailing school predates them by a decade.
Yeah, yes. I guess he finally figured it all out and then launched the boat shows with some partners then.
Well, it's kind of interesting that you sit there and say, we spoke with Annapolis Yacht Sales as well. And, one of the questions I had for them was way back when this was a waterman's town and it wasn't the shishi sailing capital of America and everything else. And why did they, and I think they're celebrating their 25th anniversary, why did they relocate here into Annapolis and with the sailing? And obviously it's probably in no small part to Jerry Woods and the foundation of the Annapolis Sailing School with bringing recreational sailing to the city.
Yeah, I think so, because at the time, I guess you either perhaps learned sailing because it was part of your trade, or maybe at a yacht club. So it was definitely something for the very wealthy. And so Jerry democratized it in terms of bringing it to anyone who had a week and wanted to learn how to sail, and thought about it enough. He had the Rainbow 24, a boat specially built for teaching students. Features like with an 1,100-pound keel, you can't capsize it. Although my John Cosby, who runs the general manager of the school, tells me, Rick, don't say that. That may tempt somebody. But by building a boat that made people feel safe, so they could be comfortable in the water and forgiving in terms of learning, he really saw a different path from the traditional yacht club teaching, or perhaps people that just learned by themselves. And so now it's kind of accepted in terms of sailing schools and American Sailing Association certifications and things such as this. But he was the Annapolis Sailing School really pioneered all that.
So he actually had a boat specifically, a model or a style of a boat specifically built for the sailing school? Yes.
He actually set out in terms of design and, had things which at the time certainly were not, I wouldn't say revolutionary, but really forward thinking in terms of how to approach the teaching of the sailing. He had a high freeboard, which certainly made it more comfortable for the sailors, a large cockpit in which they could operate. And just the lines that he designed for it which made it a fast boat for its day as well as an instructional boat.
Interesting. Now, yeah, you said you've owned the school for 5 years. How did you guys come into the ownership of this? Was this just like one crazy night at Davis's that turned out well or wrong?
Yes, just you've come about it quite accurately. Although I can't even have the excuse of too many beers to excuse what has been a very fun endeavor. But really, what had happened was Tim Dowling, who was the owner after Jerry and Kathy Wood, and previous to us. Tim was looking to expand the sailing school and put a marina in addition to the sailing school. And my wife and family thought, well, it might be nice just to keep it just as a sailing school. And so Tim was good enough to entertain an offer to purchase it from us, because I know Tim is very interested in the legacy of the school as well. And so it started out as kind of, oh, well, gee, if you don't like a marina there, maybe we could buy the school. It turned out to be maybe a boast, if you will, that I had to execute on.
Well, that's interesting. Yeah, absolutely. And it's kind of neat that your wife, you said, was an instructor there at one point.
Yes. Jenny was an instructor there, as was not only John was an instructor, the manager of school, an instructor, but had run the school at one point. I think most of the kids in the Wilson family, my wife's family, had worked there at one time. And so there's a long family history of involvement with the school. And indeed, when going back and looking at the history, we're compiling research in terms of kind of famous students or instructors and what they've gone on to. But one of the things that we discovered was that many married couples met their significant other there. John met his wife, Hillary, there. Dave Cyphers, who now does marketing
in
work.
Crofton.
Dave met his wife there, and it's a pretty extensive list. So maybe we could add to sailing school a meetup for couples as well.
I was gonna say Match.com ain't got nothing on you guys. Huh?
For the sailors. So
that's a pretty good track record, to be honest with you.
Yeah, it's nice, but I do think it speaks to something we've now highlighted in our motto, if you will, seriously fun. But people learn there, students, instructors, certainly in terms of teaching, but they have an enjoyable time, and so it's setting up, I think, a community, a sailing community, but perhaps a little bit different than what one would get at a yacht club or some other teaching areas. Well,
I know I do have to thank you, even though you probably don't know what I'm thanking you for, because I trespass on your property an awful lot. For those that that don't realize where the Annapolis Sailing School is, if you go down Edgewood Road right off of Forest, I guess it's Bay Ridge Road at that point, but Forest Drive, it turns into Bembe Beach Road, and eventually it turns into the Chesapeake Bay. And just before it turns into the Chesapeake Bay, that is the Annapolis Sailing School, right there at the very end of Bembe Beach Road. I have been down there. When the polar bear plunge was canceled, my daughter insisted on plunging the day because it was god awful rainy, icy, and she plunged right there at the Annapolis Sailing School. And I know I've been down there a number of times for like those crazy full moons that come up over the bay occasionally for taking some pictures and whatnot there.
Yes. Well, I'm glad you enjoy it. In fact, it is funny that you mentioned it. That there's some people that live on Bembe Beach Road that don't even realize that the sailing school is at the end of it. And as you noted, when you get there, you have two beaches, which are a rarity in Annapolis. One looking out to the Bay Bridge, one looking back over Eastport to Annapolis. And a lot of our sailing members, they're there mainly to sail, particularly our keelboat club members, as well as students. But because of the nice shallow water there, they'll have their kids there to go out swimming in a very safe environment, or taking a paddleboard or a kayak that we make available to them. So it's a great recreational attribute as well as beautiful view.
Has this morphed into a yacht club type of an atmosphere than a pure sailing school? I know that I've checked out the website, which is annapolissailing.com. And I know that you obviously have courses to learn how to sail, but there's camps and there's a club. You just mentioned the keelboat club, the kayaks and stuff like that. Has it gotten to be more into a social type of a organization than just a sailing club?
Yeah, no, I think you're right, because what we want to encourage people is to get out on the water sailing and to make it a lifetime experience. And so it's fine to teach people, and we enjoy that very much. And starting with our kidship program, so kids 5 to 15 learn how to sail, and then adults, whether it's basic sailor or coastal navigation or bareboat cruising. And so some people go on and they will perhaps buy a bigger boat. Some will charter in the Caribbean, but there's a large group that want to go day sailing. And so, as you indicate, we created a keelboat club so that people could come back, but not only to go out sailing, to really be with like-minded people. And so not only different sailing events that we have, like our Monday night regattas, where people can practice their skills, but also lectures about the water and other activities, be it paddleboard or kayaks. And I think the idea, though, is not to become like an AYC or Eastport Yacht Club, which are great institutions, but more formal dining areas, things like that. This is more for people who like sailing and like to be with like-minded people, perhaps without the formalities. And so we've improved our facilities to support that. We put in what we call the sail shed, which has air conditioning, has couches, has a bar for the members to use only. But that previously had been literally a sail shed with no windows.
Okay.
Now it's got the best port view of Back Creek and Eastport. People can watch life float by as they enjoy that. But yeah, so I would say a different type of, not yacht club, but a different type of sailing community is what we've set out to create.
So there's no waterfront swimming pools and restaurants and dance clubs and everything else planned for it?
No. Well, if you saw me dance, you'd thank me for never thinking of setting up any dance club. But no, our sailing has declined in terms of general participation. Certainly since, let's say, the peak in the early '80s. Looking back at Jerry Wood and the records that we can see. And so our mission is really to see if we can revitalize that to a certain extent, and going, if you will, from what I'll say is family to modern family. So, there's the kind of traditional nuclear family of 2 parents, 2 kids, and providing an experience for them, but with I'll say a modern twist, because what we hear from a lot of parents is, well, the time I spend with my children, it's usually in a car driving them from soccer practice to lacrosse practice to dance class, and not really interacting. Once I'm there, I'm just a passive participant, just watching them. And so with families, getting them out in the water together in a place where a cell phone really has no use and need. But then extending beyond that, because there's different groups that would really like to sail together. For example, we offer female-only classes because sometimes that's a more supportive environment in which women can learn sailing versus something which has traditionally been a little bit more male-dominated out in the water. But there's other broader communities. It can be communities of older sailors. When you look in talking to Rob Savage, the District 7 Ward Alderman, he noted that he has the largest concentration of seniors in Annapolis. And if you actually look along the road into the sailing school, there's several senior living areas.
Absolutely.
And so providing something for that community, again, modern family, if you will, but getting them out in the water is something that we're focused on. So it's an effort that I think is great for sailing, and at the same time, it's good for the sailing school.
Hey, Rick, just one more thing. Can you talk to us a little bit about, I know you've got courses and camps and clubs and rentals and everything else that go along with that. And I certainly appreciate you taking time. I know we weren't able to connect with your travel schedule, and we're calling from New York right now. So I appreciate you taking the time today. But can you tell us a little bit more about the courses, the camps, and all the other different offerings that we do have here at Annapolis Sailing School?
Well, I could wax eloquently on that. I think actually it might be best for you to speak with John Cosby, who's the managing director, the general manager of the school. It's been a big part of the success, and he could give you the details on what we're doing in our different programs.
Well, I'll tell you what, we can do that by the magic of technology. I can, and because you are literally about a half a mile from my house, I think I will run down there, see if I can get a hold of John and get the details on that, and we'll stitch it all magically together. But Rick, you and your wife have done a great job with the school. I mean, it's got a wonderful reputation. I mean, you've carried on a wonderful legacy that was started from Jerry Woods 60 years ago, which is real borderline on how old I am. So, I mean, I'm still glad that there's something older than me that exists. But that's,
Well, thank you. Again, we really love what we're doing, and we appreciate the legacy we have because it's had such a big impact on Annapolis. But we're really looking forward and excited for the programs we have in place to expand the school and sailing in Annapolis.
Fantastic. Well, I'll tell you what, I'm going to go down Bembe Beach Road there and see if I can get a hold of John, and you enjoy the rest of your day.
Excellent. Thank you very much.
Well, and by the magic of audio, we are down here off of Bembe Beach Road at Annapolis Sailing School with John Cosby. How are you?
I'm fine. How about yourself?
Great. First things first, I just got off the phone with Rick, and he said you guys have unsinkable boats, and I want to see it.
Well, we operate with the training boat we use is a 24-foot Rainbow. It was a boat designed by Sparkman & Stevens. Olin Stevens was the main designer of the boat, and Jerry Wood, who was the founder of the school back in 1959, if you count that up, this makes 60 years here.
Which I'm very happy about because that's still older than I am. So that's
It is a little bit older than I am too. But he had started the sailing school not as Annapolis Sailing School, but it started as Annapolis Boat Rentals at the foot of Sixth Street.
Okay.
There's a small little, if you even go to this day, you can see there was kind of a bulkhead and a little bit, and a couple little piers out there. And he started renting what they called Mustangs back then, which were a wooden day sailor, but it was tippy. And for one, Annapolis Boat Rentals was there doing its thing, but then he realized that he didn't have a whole lot of people that came to rent his boats that knew what they were doing. So chicken or the egg thing, it became, well, I better open a school to teach these people how to use these boats, or I'm going to sit here with a lot of boats sitting at the dock that I can't, put them on. So Annapolis Sailing School became the second business that Jerry had hatched in the 59-60 area. And then about 61, he realized that the boat he had wasn't really the boat he wanted. And he was in the toy business. I think he made injection molded dolls was part of the things he did. But he had a company that he knew or worked with called Tidewater Plastics. And taking the design that came from Sparkman & Stevens and having a company that could make boats, they built what we call the Rainbow 24, which is absolutely the finest learning vessel there is out on the water. For one, you can run them into the dock, you can T-bone them, you can do pretty much anything you want to a Rainbow, and it just bounces off. You might have to paint a little bit here and shine up a little bit there, but the boat is pretty much indestructible. But
probably something ideal for somebody that's teaching people that have never sailed before.
Truly. And, the joke goes that Jerry approached Olin and said, at Olin Stevens, at Sparkman & Stevens, said, I'd like a boat 3 drunks can take out in a thunderstorm and come back okay in. And that's where the Rainbow came from. So they were produced from 1962 up until around 1984. 1984 was about the last boat that came off, and I think we still have that boat here. It's boat number 400, hull number 483. During the heyday in the 60s, he was not only, using the boats to thing, he sold them. So he had, he had a boat dealership here going on, and
they're not made anymore.
They're not made anymore.
So you're dealing with 84, 94, 04, 14, 35-year-old boats is what
some
you're
of them
still?
50 years old.
Wow,
absolutely. But they were super heavily built. We have a shop that's made really just for the rainbows, and we can bring them in here at the end of the season, and it takes about 3.5 hours to totally disassemble one, and go back, replace rub rails, do a little sanding, some fresh paint on them. The rigs, take a little bit, but we've always put brand new sails on the boat. This is I think we're on our 20th set of sails that we've had in the last 5 years. So locally we've got Quantum Sails builds our sails for us.
Right. Fantastic. Well, now, so you guys are a year-round operation then, pretty much?
We're here year-round. We teach from the very last week of March all the way until pretty much the end of October.
Okay. And just sort of dodge around the boat shows.
When you get around those edges, you start to get the days get short, and it just gets cold.
Right.
And being out on the water, everybody pushes it in March. They've been making boat payments all winter long.
Right.
Oh my gosh, it looks gorgeous. Let's take the boat out. But except when they get out there, they realize that the water's 35 degrees and the air is 50, and it's way too cold out there. But that's just.
Right. Well, it's psychological, but
sure.
So how many boats do you have now?
So the sailing school has 74 boats in its fleet right now. We use about a dozen rainbows in the water now. We have about 10 more in the back lot that are in various stages of rebuilding or getting them ready to put into the fleet. A couple of them are probably going to get stripped of all their older parts, and we'll use them as spares. But I think that we can keep the fleet with the rainbows around 15 to 20 will be fine. Helps us expand a little bit. But then we also run in the summer, and it's running right now behind you, a kidship program. And the kidship program uses Americans, a new RS Zest, which is a boat that we've just gotten involved with this year. We have Hobie Cats, we have lasers, many boats in the fleet for the kids that also builds up those numbers.
I'm not a sailor, but the Hobie Cat, are we just talking about the old catamaran that I used to know?
Very much like that, except this one's called a getaway.
Okay.
So it's a little more forgiving. It's a little easier to get going, and two people can pick it up and kind of get it off the beach.
Gotcha. Well, let's talk about. You said you've got the kids camp that's going on here.
Sure.
The kids sail. What programs are there here?
Kidship is a program for kids from 5 to 15. The 5 to 7-year-olds we call little sailors. They will sail from they'll show up on the property with their parents or grandparents mostly just before 9, and they'll go until 12. Well, they might have 45, 50 minutes in the classroom, kind of figuring out what they're going to do today, and then we send them out on the water. Now, those boats have an instructor on every single boat. So we're a little different from...
So you're not sending 5-year-olds out there in the middle of the bay on their own?
They're not on their own. But we're different from the other camps in town where you might be on an Opti or something like that, and those boats don't lend themselves to having, an instructor aboard. They're just a different camp. We're more of a recreational. We're trying to teach the kids the joy of just being on the water. And you let them do it with their age group. And if you can do that with their age group, it becomes not so tedious for the kids. As we all know that there's not a kid alive that wants to do what their parents ask them to do.
Sure.
So when we let them go out, with their peers on a boat with kind of instructor just making sure things are safe, it can nurture and build that desire to want to, maybe make this something that they do as a recreational hobby their whole lives.
Absolutely. Well, I agree with the concept of let's get on the water. Let's see if we enjoy sailing, period. Before we get into this whole racing thing, I mean, you can go any number of different ways once you learn how to sail.
Sure.
I mean, you can get into, competitive racing. You can get into collegiate racing or professional racing or just recreational racing, cruising. transatlantic and everything else. So I think you're onto something for sure.
Yeah, we have found, and then I'll give you a little more insight into how this goes. With those kids, 3 hours is about as much as their attention span will let them go. We always laugh because the parents will come up the next day and said they didn't even make it to the top of the hill before they were out. Way to go! That's
need to give them a little bit more sugar on the way out.
Yeah. So then our biggest class that we do is 505, which is what we call Sailing Essentials. And that's for the kids that may have had a little experience on the water, may have been here last year doing the little sailors class. And they're on the water pretty much from 9 to 3. Now, there's a break for lunch, and there's also a couple breaks for some theory in a classroom. Right. But there's only so much. But what we truly find is that they start to build lifelong friendships with the kids that, maybe are 2 states away or 2 counties away. And they become, what I am thrilled with is that eventually they might move from the 505 Sailing Essentials to go to an intermediate class or what we call a competition class. We don't do racing here. We're not a racing school. Okay. We're not a racing. That's not part of what we do here. But when those kids turn 15 or 16, they become my best instructors.
Okay.
So we are building kind of a pot of these kids that love doing it. I think we've got 4 instructors on our current list that were all alumni of the Kidship Sailing School.
Well, I know it was funny when we were talking to Rick, he said that his wife had been an instructor and participated down in the sailing school at one point as well. So, I mean, you certainly do have a lot of alumni and legacies that are coming through in various forms of operations, I guess.
Yeah, I met Jenny as an instructor here back in 1976. I was a 15-year-old, and this was my first summer job.
Nice.
We didn't have a kidship sailing school, so I was an adult sailing instructor. I will say that is one of the best things to have on your resume is that you were a sailing instructor. I've had many job interviews in my life, and the one thing that you're always asked about is, what's this thing about sailing instructor? And we've always found that, for one, as a 15-year-old, being able to communicate with maybe a 30, 50, or 60-year-old that's taking beginning sailing lessons.
As well as a 5-year-old.
Yeah, as well as a 5-year-old. But they become so... It's a confidence level they have that they've got to jump on all their peers. Being able to communicate and teach something to someone that's interested in learning, they actually are paying for being here.
Sure.
And doing that is truly, we end up with some very, very, very skilled and highly successful young men and women that are graduates of this school that have worked here.
Well, how many? What is your typical customer, your typical sailing people? I mean, you talked about the 5 to the little sailors and
Sure.
and whatnot. I mean, do you have a lot of adults that are looking to do that?
So the sailing school is, I would say, about 55% for the school is for adults.
Okay.
With kidship probably being somewhere in the 20%, maybe 25%. And our majority of our students are going to be in the 35 to 60-year-old range. Where we find them is, for one, you get a lot of people, because of Washington and because of its transient nature, political, sure. However that works, a lot of people move in to Washington and they're, maybe they're from Pig's Knuckle, Arkansas. Right. I don't know.
4 years and done, 8 years and done.
And they're here, and suddenly, they realize, wow, look at this bay thing out here. Look at this gorgeous piece of water, and that sailboat, what's that about? So we tend to offer one program through Groupon, which allows people to come and get a 2-hour sail for $75.
And that's just the taste.
That's just the taste. And then if they like that,
do you spike their water or something?
I'm sorry,
do you spike their water or something? Get them out there, roofie them, and
it is. What we've found is that if we'll tell them, hey, are you interested in? Would you like to really do more of this? We'll eat the cost of that Groupon they bought and put it towards their first sailing lesson. So that's becomes, a little popular for us, a very a nice tool. And it's amazing how you can get people that just kind of are a little trepidatious on Saturday morning, but on Sunday afternoon, after they've been here for 2 days or maybe 3 days if they're getting certified, they're the most gung-ho people you've ever met, and they are ready to start singing sailor songs and
cursing Monday to come around. We just need one more day for the weekend to get this over with. Sure. Well, you do certifications as well, right?
We do. So we're an ASA school.
Which is American Sailing Association?
American Sailing Association. There's 2 basic certifying bodies in the United States. There's U.S. Sailing, which is more of the competition sailing, and then there's ASA, which is for the recreational sailor, also maybe your cruisers, people that are just getting into it for the sheer joy, but they also need a little bit of certification so that they can go somewhere and rent a boat. We allow our graduates, whether they're certified or not, to come rent our boats. But if someone comes from the outside and wants to rent a Rainbow from us, during the week or the weekend, if we have boats available that aren't being used for classes, we will, kind of check them out. Where did you learn to sail? What's your skill level? If they're ASA certified, we're happy to let them go. Of course, they still need a little bit of, local knowledge to understand the
channels, whatever
the
things.
Sandbar at Horn Point, or you'll run aground right off of Bembe Beach,
and it's
if you're not
probably
careful.
an unfamiliar boat to them.
Certainly.
So you also do rent boats.
We do rent boats.
I mean, that's something. So if I wanted to come down and sail for a day, I could
absolutely come on down, give us a call. We'll tell you what the weather conditions are today. You can look out there, and I'm sorry you guys can't see it, but it's pretty light wind out there right now. There's a little bit of wind off of Horn Point. You can see where the water's a little bit darker. But right now the winds are pretty light. But then, many times, the big difference is if you can get the I don't know what it got down to last night. Maybe it got down to 76 degrees, and it's going to get to 90 today. There's 14 degrees of change there. That's not a whole lot of difference between morning and night. So those days tend to be not so windy. Where you get in the fall, it gets down to, 45 at night, and it gets up to maybe 75. There's 30 degrees. You're going to have a whole lot of mixing in the atmosphere, and we have some wind.
You can rent boats here. And you've also added sort of a social aspect to this. I noticed at the end of your property here, you've got a big tent that looks somewhat permanent. I don't know if it's a permanent structure.
It goes up at the end of April, and it usually comes down right after the boat show. We do weddings. We do crab feasts. We'll have one of the classes from the Naval Academy, the class of 62 or something like that, will come and have a reunion and a crab feast, and it's usually on the same day as the Blue Angels flying. So they're out there kind of watching, commissioning week is going on.
Ooh, I'm looking at this. This is like a real great spot for them.
We have a great spot to see the Blue Angels.
For those that, those aren't aware, it's all the way at the end of Bembe Beach Road. I know we talked about this a little bit with Rick, but the views are spectacular. It's, I would say almost 360, but you're probably every bit of 270 degrees looking down off toward
Absolutely.
the
To
Thomas
my left,
Point.
I'm looking down Back Creek, and to my right, as I come across, I see the mouth of the Severn River. And all the way to my right, I'm seeing the Chesapeake Bay and all the way down to Bay Ridge.
Yeah, it's a phenomenal location. Now, how long have you been, obviously you're not on the street end corner of 6th Street anymore. So how long have you been here?
So the school started here in like 68, 69, using this spot. But again, it was just the spot to sail out of. There was no teaching done here. In theory-wise, all the classes were done over at 6th Street. Those were classrooms at 601 6th Street. This building was built at around 1979 over the winter, and it popped up, and it was built with 2 large classrooms upstairs so we can, back then, wow, we had weekends where we had 120 students in one weekend. That's 30 sailboats.
That's a lot.
Yeah. There was a big heyday here, and I will say that we're kind of coming back to it. Last weekend and the weekend before that, we were up to, using 11 or 12 boats between rentals and classes, where when we got here and Rick and his wife purchased the business in 2014, it was 4. Maybe 5 boats being used. So it's been a huge renaissance in sailing.
That's good to hear. And you guys have really sort of stood the test of time as well. I know there were some other sailing schools that have come and gone, and I mean Annapolis Sailing School, 60 years.
Sure, one of the catchphrases that was always used was the Annapolis way of learning. We were here a lot longer than ASA was. ASA is something that has kind of been around for 25, 30 years maybe. We were the real first adult sailing school. You could learn at a yacht club. You could learn if you were a member of, some kind of existing, but we were the first kind of standalone. You wanted to just come learn to sail and didn't really have a attachment or some kind of way to get on the water. You could come here and do that. The Annapolis way is what we try to do, is to give you just enough theory to get out on the water and practice. Still to this day, our classes, you might show up on a Saturday morning for our 2-day week lesson. You'll spend about 35, 40 minutes in a classroom, and then we go right out on the boats. And you'll be sailing by 10 o'clock in the morning, and you'll sail for a couple hours. Then you come back, have some lunch. You'll come back up in the classroom, and he'll give you another layer of theory, but just enough that you can add on, and then you can go back out and practice it.
And you build on it and build on it.
You build on it. By Sunday afternoon. It's
nice that you've got a curriculum as opposed to, and I mean, I know you've learned from other people. I mean, certainly there's probably by far the majority of sailors today have learned from a friend, a parent,
Sure.
Whatnot. Hey, come on out. I'll show you how to sail. But it's not a curriculum. Again, you're like, you just sort of know it. It becomes innate after so many years of this. But this is something that gives you the tools immediately. It's your job to retain them, obviously.
Yeah, having the curriculum, make sure you touch all the bases.
Right.
You've got to teach people. What do we do if the wind's blowing too hard? But we still want to go sailing, or you're out there and the wind starts blowing too hard. You got to teach them how to reef the sail or reduce the amount of sail available to the wind.
That sounds too much like physics and math.
It's a little bit there, but it's a skill that once, because of the rainbows were designed by kind of the top of the line sailing architects. The boat can pretty much handle up to 25 knots of wind. Now that's with a storm jib, which is a really tiny little handkerchief-sized jib up there, and a reef main. But you can go out there and sail a rainbow, and where many other boats are, they've headed back to the barn.
Wow. I mean, this has really sort of grown, and I know that the Nelsons have really expanded this.
Sure.
And it looks like nobody's stopping anytime soon. I mean, as you said, we're seeing a renaissance in the interest in sailing. Recession, thankfully, is past. I imagine that probably put a little bit of a damper on.
Oh, that's the biggest part. If people have spare money, a little bit of disposable income, and you asked about earlier about my, what's my, draw a picture of what my customer is. A lot of those customers have just put their last kid on their own insurance policy. They've reached 26 and they've moved out. And now they're looking, on weekends, they're not doing the soccer thing anymore, and they're not, planning for weddings and all the stuff that we all do, as we grow older. And then they're going, wow, we got some free time. What are we going to do?
You just kind of like described me. My youngest just graduated college. She got a job. All three of them are out in the workplace, in their own houses.
Yeah.
I keep threatening to change the locks on the door and maybe move so they don't know where I'm living. I mean, you describe me. And again, I'm a self-admitted not sailor. I tend to. I had a power boat at one point, and then I realized that somebody else's boat was more beneficial to me.
Well, it's funny, and you talk about power boats. The powerboat thing has had a big resurgence too.
Right.
There was what we used to call jingle mail in the 2008, 2009, where people had bought powerboats, and suddenly you operate the boat and you got to put $300 worth of fuel in it at the end of the weekend.
That was my aha moment when before I sold my boat. It was before the recession, so it was probably back in like 2002, 2003, and I turned around and I said, okay, this season I used it 5 times just because of work constraints and everything else. It was costing me $250 a day in fuel, and that wasn't running it all out all day.
Sure.
And, then you talk about the note on the boat, you talk about the docking, the maintenance, the whole 9 yards. I said, this thing cost me like $9,000 a year. I'm like, for 5 days, okay, so that's oh my God.
Yeah. Go charter one.
Yeah, that's
charter it, and then when you
absolute-
walk away, you just say, thank you very much. And if you paid twice, who cares? What it's really worth.
You're still ahead of the game. But
you're still way
but sailing is something that's always intrigued me. And it sounds like something that, and you just sort of described me as far as my position in life now at this point, as the kids are older and they're out on their own and starting their own adult lives. And I'm not tooling around doing this or that.
I guess sailing, and I please don't take me the wrong way when I say this, but sailing's kind of the one thing where you can just detach from the rest of the world, and just leave your phone in the boat. If you got a radio,
the world needs more people to detach.
It just needs to kind of detach. I used to, in fact, when I was marina manager here in the early '80s, I used to have a radio, that kind of was always with the managers above me and the owners, and I always called it an electronic leash, and hey, wouldn't it nice just to turn that thing off and, you make sure everything's taken care of at home and, so what if someone can't get in touch with you for a couple hours? If you're going to be back in, as long as you're safe, you got to have a VHF radio in case you got a problem, and maybe you've got a phone you can turn back on should you need to.
Right.
But, just the joy of not being attached to the world,
not being gotten.
Yeah,
it's definitely the call of the sea, I guess. If you will, it's a little bit differently. So, what else do we need to know about Annapolis Sailing School that we may not know? Obviously, you're growing. We can rent sailboats here by the day.
Sure. Well, we've only talked about the beginning stuff and what we do with kidship and what we do with the rainbows. But if you look over here to the middle, you'll see our larger boats. And what we've, really that is just taken off is the people that want to move from a day sailor, a little rainbow, or whether they're using a Hobie Cat or a beam reach is still a beam reach on a 15-foot boat or a 70-foot boat. It's the same thing. But what we do now is we've been transferring these people over to the larger boats. We have two 37s and two 30-foot boats that we do advanced classes on. So the 103 is basic coastal cruising. It takes someone from a rainbow and introduces them to a boat that, has furling gear. It has big winches. It's got an engine. You're going to go in backwards on purpose. There's, a wheel. A tiller is what you're used to when you're sailing a small boat.
Right.
But this is, you're going to a larger boat. And we do 3-day classes for 103 and 104. You can do the home version for 103 and for 103, which means you can come here at 9 in the morning and be done by 4, or you can do the immersive one, where you show up here, we go to the Giant and fill up our, we get our provisioning going, and off we go and we sail. Maybe a 4 or 5 hour sail. We go north to Gibson Island or to Dobbins Island in the Magathy, or we go south down to Road River, anchor. It's immersive. Becomes kind of a mini vacation. You wake up the next morning and you sail across the bay. If you're going north, we go to Rock Hall. If you're going south, we go to St. Michael's. You get someone to cook a nice meal for you. You got some showers there. It's a place to walk around and do it. And then you realize, wow, this is fun. This is something that you might, become a lifelong way for you to kind of escape the workaday world.
Right.
Is to jump on a big boat or a bigger boat and just have a nice weekend.
Well, that's where the boating industry tricks you in. You always want a bigger boat.
Sure.
the new one, new model. So you've got the larger boats, you've got the kids programs, you've got the sailing classes, you've got events here.
Sure.
And this is all available. You can see all this on your website, which is AnnapolisSailing.com.
AnnapolisSailing.com with the 2 S's. I will say, one thing that we've also added and has become very popular is that we run what we call our keelboat club. So those are for people that, may have learned to sail but don't have access to a boat. You can join our keelboat club, and it gives you kind of prepaid access, and it's not a timeshare, guys. This is just a way for you to come, put some money down, and then, give us a call, and we'll have a boat waiting for you at the dock with sails ready to go. All you do is jump aboard, hoist your sails, and off you go. So they're not paying for the dock fleas. They're not paying for maintenance. They're not paying for any of that. We're just providing them a way to get out on the bay, here kind of is at a much less expensive than just renting a boat from us.
Okay, so this is sort of a boat club, but a little bit, yeah. I mean, it's a boat club. Now, does this also include your smaller boats and your bigger boats? Or
it includes not the dinghies. The dinghies are a whole different thing. If I was to take you out on a rainbow, you'd find yourself very comfortable in it. If I was to put you on that same day and put you onto one of our dinghies and you weren't quite ready, you're probably going to come back wet.
Okay.
You're not going to be quite dressed for it. It's a different way of sailing. You're a little closer to the water, and you need to be a little more nimble than many of us in our 50s are.
Right.
But it also allows you to sail and be with a group of people that just learned to sail just like you did. So you don't feel like you're, around someone that's looking down on you. It's that kind of the yacht club. People are always afraid to dock their boat at the yacht club because they think they got 20 sets of eyes watching how good they're doing it.
Right.
I couldn't care less. If you hit the dock, it's what happens. We're a sailing school. We're not this is not Newport or anything like that. And you can only learn by making mistakes.
Absolutely.
So we're happy to watch people make mistakes. They make them, and then they learn not to make them the next time.
And how many people are a part of your keel club?
Right now, I think we've got about 55 members of the Keelboat Club. And there's different levels. We have members that are qualified to take out our 30-footers in the ultimate level. We've got the majority of the Keelboat Club members are in the middle kind of rainbow level, so they get unlimited use on weekdays, and they get a certain amount of uses during the weekends to come use our boats.
So that's during a season. You may say you get 10 in-season rentals or something, whatever it may be.
Yeah, and then, but also we do, in the wintertime, we do, navigation courses on 12-volt systems, all kinds of seminars here at the school. Plus, you're welcome to come use the property. We've got, 2 beaches. We're the only kind of 2. Yeah. Now, it's private. You got to join. We can't just open our beaches up to the public. But we also have kayaks and paddleboards. So if you do, you want to go sailing and you want your kids to, putz around and play around, it's certainly welcome to have them.
And that's an amenity.
That's correct.
Wow. Who knew?
Yeah.
Who knew? Well, I'll tell you what, John Cosby, thank you for a little bit of the insight into Annapolis Sailing School. Congratulations on, not you, but on the school for 60 years. I wouldn't presume to. We're both younger than that. Yeah. We're going to hold on to that. But 60 years going strong and getting stronger every day. And I do recommend anybody that's interested in sailing. And I'll probably sound like a hair club for men thing, but I'll probably be a customer pretty soon.
Sure, but it's the way it works.
AnnapolisSailing.com. And just come on down and see this beautiful property. If you just take off of Forest Drive, if you're heading toward Bay Ridge, take a left on Edgewood Road and just stop just short of the bay.
Yeah. You keep going, you'll be in my parking lot eventually.
And it's a fantastic location. I can't think of a location that could get you out on the water any quicker.
Yeah.
I mean, you're not in a harbor. You're right here on the point.
Yeah.
I'm looking at the floating dock with the boats tied up. I mean, you undo the cleat and you're out.
Yeah, 90 seconds. The time you leave your dock, you're out in the Severn River.
That's amazing. John Cosby, thank you very much.
It was a pleasure being over with you. Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks for listening to this special podcast for Annapolis. Please be sure to visit Annapolis.net for all your local news, events, and opinions. And in case you haven't already, please subscribe to the Annapolis Daily News Brief, where we bring you your local news direct to your phone or tablet every Monday through Friday at 7 a.m. Subscribe on iTunes or Google Play.